Neal, hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I've been busy running around all day, so I wasn't glued to the television, but I've since watched a lot of things online. And I have to say, watching that video was so chilling and so frightening. We've seen much of that footage already in some very powerful montages, but the way it showed and kind of went back and forth from the speech that then President Trump was giving and the actions of the mob and the insurrectionists, it was incredibly effective. Tell me your thoughts, Neal, as you watch that.
Yeah, I think what did the work, Katie, is, first of all, it was just well done in terms of the execution of the video and so on. But what did the work is actually we knew it all. We knew what you didn't have to know. You may not have seen that angle or this angle or whatever, but all of these things were things we experienced on January 6th and have collectively, for the best of reasons, repressed a little bit in our own minds because it is so painful to think about branch of government and our capital being stormed by these people and the violence. I've always thought that was the hardest task of the House managers, which is those are the folks prosecuting the case in the Senate, is to force people to think and confront about what happened because it's so much easier to just pretend it didn't happen. And I felt like I do that in my own mind in the days after January 6th. And so, I thought the video was particularly effective in kind of reminding everyone, what is this about? This is about like the heart and soul of what the country is. Like, this is not, about like an impeachment over sex or even an impeachment over trying to cheat an election. This is like literally encouraging an armed attack on a coordinate branch of government. So I thought it was incredibly effective.
Neal, let's talk about Jamie Raskin, the congressman from Maryland, who I thought did an excellent job of laying out the case. One of the first comments was you cannot impeach someone after he is out or she is out of office. And I thought he did an excellent job talking about everyone from Warren Hastings to state constitutions that actually are the exact opposite of that claim. They state, and they never state anything to the contrary, that someone cannot be impeached after leaving office. Can you just give us the headlines for that, or synthesize Jamie Raskin's argument?
Sure. First, let me just start with Jamie Raskin. I was covering the trial for NBC today, and I said then, I think Jamie Raskin gave what might be the best oral argument I've ever seen. And it wasn't just the logic of a legal argument, which I'll break down in a second. It was also the emotional appeal. To be able to pull both of those off and in such an elegant and moving way, I thought was just phenomenal. He rose to the moment. And you never know when you've got an advocate going and doing something, which obviously by definition has never happened before for him. He's not been on the world stage the way he was today. And he just rose to the moment and captured the gravity of it.
We should mention that he had a personal tragedy. His son, who I believe was only 25,
25, yeah.
took his life, I think, not too long ago. So it was very moving when he talked about that. Some people want me to turn off the comments. I'm always torn about this because I appreciate hearing what people have to say. But I think we have enough people asking us to turn them off. Adriana, I just want to make sure. So Neal, while I'm doing that, and we've got some great questions from social media, and if you all want to ask the questions in the questions area, whatever you call that, I'll look at those and see if we can get to some of them. But okay, so Jamie Raskin, I think everyone agrees, did an incredible job. But without getting too much in the weeds, Neal, as a constitutional law expert, it seems that there is absolutely no basis in the assessment that you cannot impeach someone once they have left office, correct?
Well, I wouldn't just say there's no basis. I would say that the vast weight of scholarly evidence is on the idea that you can impeach a former official. But I thought one of the things that Jamie Raskin did so effectively today is he said, you know what? This doesn't really matter, this whole debate, because Trump, when he was impeached, was the president. He wasn't a former president. He was the president. And these actions are actions he took while president. So it's not like you're going back in the past and saying, you know, Trump in the 1970s was a race discriminator or whatever else and trying to impeach him for that. Nope. It's what he did while president. And, you know, this argument was put forth the best, I thought, last week by McConnell, but not Mitch McConnell, but Judge Michael McConnell, former judge of the 10th Circuit, pretty much regarded as one of the very top conservative jurists in the country. And he said, basically, yeah, the debate is beside the point because Trump was a sitting official, not a former, at the time. So that was the argument that Jamie Raskin and the other House managers made in the brief last week, and the argument that they made today. And Trump's lawyers have had chance after chance to answer it, both in the briefs and today. What did we hear from them? Crickets, zero. They didn't even bother to answer it.
Well, Bruce Castor's opening statements, I guess you call them opening statements, were so rambling and disconnected and almost nonsensical. He said he switched his whole presentation after he watched the Democrats. What did you make of that, Neal? I mean, it was, you know, even if you say the vast majority of scholarly evidence would indicate something, you would think he would be prepared with something, but what was that?
I have no idea. I mean, really, I don't. I mean, it was atrocious beyond words. And, you know, I don't think the president has good arguments on, you know, really at the end of the day. I think he has political arguments, like if you do this to me, I'm going to come after you. But I don't think he has legal arguments. I think that was reflected today. There was a real gap in presentation and logic and reasoning and skill and execution in every way, shape, and form, top to bottom. It was an abysmal disaster. And, you know, I marvel at the bravado of someone to have that kind of confidence to go in and give that presentation.
I mean, it was really embarrassing, wasn't it? And I mean, I have nightmares doing things like that, right? Like not being prepared, not kind of keeping it together. It was almost bizarre.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, look, there's a certain segment of the population that thinks they can do anything. And, you know, maybe they have in the past, but we're in a new world.
Well, the cake was sort of baked even before today. I think that there were only 6 Republican senators who voted to move forward with the trial. One senator changed his mind. That was the senator from Louisiana, I believe. And I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on the party lines. Actually, here it's Bill Cassidy, from Louisiana, who switched his vote. The other Republicans were Susan Collins, Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, Ben Sasse, and Patrick Toomey. All we knew were probably going to vote that way. Were you surprised that even after this presentation, no other minds were changed?
Yes and no. Like, I'm an optimist, and I'm an optimist about my city, Washington, because I think people come here, regardless of their politics, to try and make a difference and make the world better. I think that at least that's why people come, and you see all these interns and so on. And over time, you know, the machine eats some of them up and so on. But I still am always optimistic. And, you know, my faith had been shattered for many years with watching Trump and them, you know, basically cower in the shadows and do nothing. But I did think on January 6th that there was like a moment of reckoning, like people looking into the mirror, into their souls and saying, what have I become? What has the Republican Party become? Which used to be the proud party of Reagan and has now become this weird cult-like thing, which, you know, stands for torching the Constitution and peaceful transitions of power. So I hoped that would happen. I'm still hopeful, Katie, even after the vote today. So the vote today, in some ways, is predictable. If you're a Republican senator, the last thing you want to do is have to vote on whether or not Donald Trump did it on January 6th, whether or not he, encouraged and aided this insurrection. And so the constitutional argument is a way to dodge accountability for that, to basically just say, hey, maybe he did it, maybe he didn't, I don't know, but I don't have the power to decide it. So that's the beauty of the argument for the Republican senators. And so they have their own personal interest in accepting that argument.
And that argument was what specifically? That the Senate did not have the power to hold a trial against a president who was no longer in office?
Exactly. So that's a dry, technical, legal argument. And you can get away with taking whatever view you want on that, with the American public. I think the harder part now comes for the Republican senators, because now they've lost that argument. They got voted down. Now they face a vote on, did Trump do it? That's something every American, you don't need to know a thing about the Constitution to have a view on. And particularly after the videos and everything else that's going to be presented over the next several days, views will start to form. And those views may not be the views that people hold right now.
So you're optimistic, or you believe that, in fact, when it comes to voting on conviction, that we may see more Republicans?
I am, yes. So, I think trials have a way of changing people's minds. And here, particularly given the gravity of the evidence and what I see as a thorough inability on the part of Trump's lawyers to actually rebut any of it, I think that minds can be changed, yes.
Legal scholar Brian Falk charged that the Trump team, I thought this was interesting, misrepresented his work in their brief regarding the proposition that the Senate doesn't have the authority to try a former president. Tell us about Brian Falk and how his work, in your view, if it certainly was in his view, misrepresented.
Yeah, so Brian Kalt is a law professor. He's, I have no idea what his politics are. He's a very careful scholar, and he wrote a big piece in 2001, a long law review piece, maybe 100-ish pages, basically analyzing the evidence pro and con. Can you impeach a former official? And ultimately, I think he came out and said, the weight of the evidence is, as I said to you at the start of our show today, that you can impeach a former official. What Trump's lawyers did in their brief, according to Kalt, and I've looked up some of it and it's right, is they only took the parts that said, here's the argument against impeaching a former official, and stripped it of any context or any nuance or the argument on the other side. So it was a pretty grave misrepresentation. Now, today, Trump's lawyers, I think, were very careful, because then they quoted various scholars who disagreed with them. They said, well, they might disagree on the bottom line, but here's what they said. So they did learn their lesson, which is nice. But at the end of the day, yeah, I think, Kalt's argument was distorted a bit. But I think the fundamental point, Katie, is this. We didn't even have to have any of those arguments, because this was an impeachment about not a former official, but a current official. And Trump's lawyers said zero about that today.
It seems misrepresenting people's comments, twisting them and using them for political advantage is kind of de rigueur these days, Neal.
Totally. And by the way, and just one thing, Trump's lawyers had the gall to attack the House managers for citing a blog. They cited Lawfare, which is actually an incredibly reputable, yes, it's a blog, but it's like, any, really respected, media entity at this point, and a centrist one at that. And they attacked them for citing the blog. Meanwhile, they went and cited some guy who's been banned from Twitter because of outrageous lies and the like in their brief. So, it's just, from start to finish, a clown show on the part of the Trump lawyers.
Well, let me ask you, was it just, obviously they've had lawyers who have quit. Was it just impossible to find reputable or talented lawyers who could defend what seems to be, on some level, indefensible?
I think that's part of it. I think it was indefensible. Sometimes lawyers like indefensible, right? They like the challenge. But the question is, why not here? And
defensible.
Yeah, and I've been talking to, various of my friends who are incredibly conservative and very prominent lawyers. No one will touch this thing. And one reason is that they just don't trust Trump in the end. That Trump turns on everyone. He won't pay the bills, that's one thing, but more than that, it's that if the trial goes south in any way, he'll go and attack the lawyer. He'll never take responsibility himself. And indeed, already we're seeing that. CNN has a report tonight saying that Trump was screaming at his lawyers today because he thought they had done such a bad job. And this may be the only time that I think Trump is living in reality. They did do a bad job. Like I've had some tough clients over the years. I mean, this guy's like 1000x times, the worst client times the worst client times the worst client.
I want to ask you some questions from social media, but I want to go back. You and I have discussed using Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which would bar Trump, or ban Trump, even if he is found not guilty, from running for office again. Where does that possibility stand at this juncture, Neal?
It's on a separate track, so it can be done, and it could be done by a majority vote in the House and Senate. I think that the thing is that the House impeachment vote happened, and so the Senate basically had to try this thing. So that, automatically gets super priority over anything else. If Trump isn't convicted by the Senate next week or the week after, I do expect there'll be a conversation about the 14th Amendment. I do expect there'll be more pressure on the Justice Department to look into whether Trump committed criminal acts. And here, Trump's lawyer's argument was baffling. Trump's lawyer today said, you can't impeach him because he's never been indicted for conspiracy or anything else. So he's almost begging for DOJ action. And in the past, that argument worked well because Bill Barr was the Attorney General and wasn't going to indict Donald Trump. Bill Barr is not the Attorney General anymore. These are very dangerous things to be saying.
Merrick Garland may not be so jiggy with that, as I used to say when my daughter was in 7th grade to embarrass her, right?
Right. So look, Merrick Garland is the most careful, sober, serious, apolitical. He's going to do this so by the book, and I have no idea what he's going to do. But that is very different than Bill Barr. Bill Barr just spent his time coddling and protecting this lawless man, and this is the result. I think all these people have a part to blame in this. This is not just Donald Trump's January 6th disaster. There have been a cult of enablers who led up to this point, and Bill Barr, unfortunately, is one of them.
At the same time, he even reached his breaking point, didn't he, Neal?
Yeah, and many of them do, but too little, too late.
Let's go to some of my friends in social media. They're nice enough to send in questions. One person was asking, that strange Bruce Castor statement that Castor statement that they changed their minds. And someone asked, is that normal? It did seem very odd, and he then, as a result, seemed incredibly unprepared. So I guess the question you've already answered, this isn't normal, right, Neal?
It's not normal. Like in any high stakes case, you rehearse. I do sometimes 15 practice sessions before a Supreme Court argument. If I'm the impeachment lawyer, I'm doing 30. I'm not going up there and winging it. No way. So if that is what happened, that's inexplicable.
There were 4 senators apparently who did not watch the video. Could they be barred from the jury or voting to convict or not? Apparently, Rand Paul from Kentucky, Rick Scott from Florida, Tom Cotton from Arkansas, and Marco Rubio were not there to watch the video. Any consequences as a result of that?
I don't know. I don't know what the rules are on that. I do know that there are a pretty elaborate set of rules when I wrote my book on impeachment that I remember looking at from 1867 from the Johnson impeachment. And those are really the rules that are used even today. I suspect they have something in there about, what happens if you miss a session. And maybe they had a good reason. I don't know. I won't speculate, but so I don't know what the penalty is. Sorry.
That's okay. Okay, let me see if I understand this. Here's a question. The first defense guy thinks they have a technicality. That means the whole case has to be rejected because of some detail regarding the structure of the impeachment manager's case, different from prior impeachments, making it all or nothing. What was he talking about, and is it valid? I hope you understood that question because I didn't.
Well, nobody understood what the first Trump lawyer was saying, so I don't think it's the questioner's fault as much.
Yeah,
But
not being critical. Thank you for the question.
yeah,
Myself. Go ahead.
right. So I think what that's getting at is Trump's lawyer might have said, again, where, it's kind of reading leaves that are very hard to read here, but I think he might have been saying that we've never impeached a former president. We've only impeached current ones, and that's true. We've had 3 impeachments of presidents in the past. One of Johnson, one of Clinton, one of Donald Trump, now again Donald Trump. And again, even if you think that a former president can't be impeached, the problem for this argument was that Donald Trump was not a former when he was impeached.
Someone asked, do you think the House managers will subpoena former Vice President Mike Pence?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think all the media reporting is that they don't want to because they just want this trial to be over and they don't think any additional facts are going to change any minds. I'd like to see it. I think, at some point, this is not just about changing minds. This is about the eyes of history and, building a record so that people 200, 300 years from now, we're going to read about this. I mean, we are living through an incredible moment. And it's hard sometimes when you're in the moment to see it, but we are. And I think it'd be a problem to not try and get the testimony of the vice president, indeed, former Vice President Pence, and indeed Donald Trump. I think we should hear from them. Let them say what they're going to say. And that may create a court fight and this and that, but I'd like to see it.
Can the president be compelled to testify?
Well, he can assert his Fifth Amendment rights against criminal prosecution, but they could give him immunity. And so, I think that there's a way to basically force him to testify.
Well, but do you think, Neal, you're a smart guy. Do you think he'd be able to wiggle out of that? I can't imagine he's going to come and testify.
Trump has done everything possible to avoid ever saying anything under oath. And I think that's because the one thing he realizes about himself is that he's a serial liar, and I think he's got some self-awareness. And put that guy in front of any proceeding, an FBI agent, a court, the Senate, he's going to lie. And so he will do everything possible. But, Katie, look, I think at least legally speaking, there is a way for the Senate, if they really wanted to go and get it. Now, would it maybe shut down Senate business, poison the well, jeopardize COVID relief, and 50 other really important things? Maybe. I don't understand all the political dimensions of it, but, I'm just the lawyer here. Obviously there's other values at stake here besides simply getting at the truth through the eyes of history. But it does really concern me. And maybe Trump, that will never appeal to, trying to get the truth out. But maybe for Pence, somewhere in his mind, he's got to think, this is a guy who literally was leaving me to die. Like, he didn't lift a finger when the Capitol was being attacked and people were calling for my head. Zilch. If he's got any hope of truth in him, of trying to save his party and the Republican Party and indeed the country from division, I think he should come forth and testify.
How long is this trial going to last, someone says? And can you explain what happens in either scenario? What happens if Trump is convicted and what happens if he isn't?
Yeah, so the trial is moving really fast. Again, that's because I think the Democrats want to get to Senate confirmations of the Attorney General and Merrick Garland, other things.
I think it's so essential and important, but it is a distraction from moving ahead and getting some things done for the Biden administration, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And so what they've said, for example, is they're actually going to even work on Valentine's Day this Sunday. They've passed a vote to say that they're going to have the impeachment trial go Sunday and the like to try and get this thing concluded really in a week, maybe a little more than a week. And then if Trump is convicted, he will be barred from future office holding for the rest of his life, which again is probably only symbolic at this point. I mean, this guy is toxic goods, except among, his fan base, but that's not enough to ever win anything anymore. So, but it is an important symbol. If he's not convicted, then in the impeachment proceeding, then there's those other two things we talked about before, the 14th Amendment possibility or the possibility of him facing criminal prosecution. And notably, that's not just federal prosecution. Yesterday, the New York Times reported that Georgia has opened a criminal investigation into his pressuring of votes there.
But that's obviously just going through the criminal justice system. The role of this House and Senate, the role of Congress will be done.
Yeah, no, and look, if Donald Trump paid his bills, this would be like the greatest thing for the legal industry since sliced bread. I mean, he's just a walking set of cases after case after case. Yes, he's facing criminal investigations in Georgia, in New York, perhaps other places too.
I've seen. Oh, well, this was a good question. Does the defense's First Amendment argument have any merit? That certainly has been the whole sort of raison d'etre of conservative media in recent weeks, and they pivoted quite quickly to Twitter banning the president from being on its platform and from the insurrection on January 6th. So what do you make of the First Amendment argument?
Okay, so first, just on the before impeachment, because a lot of people say this, did Twitter violate the First Amendment by banning Trump? The First Amendment only applies to the government. It doesn't apply to private actors. Katie, you can have me on, you can ban me from your Instagram. Even if you're running the New York Times, you can shut me up or not. There's no First Amendment problem because it's private action. So there's never been, nobody thinks that that's a First Amendment problem, except a couple of Trump lawyers or something, but no serious person. And then the question of the First Amendment in the impeachment proceedings, what Trump is saying, or Trump's lawyers say, well, Donald Trump is just a passionate public speaker, and he's being punished for his speech. And the question's really great from your social media person, and I think that person and anyone else interested should read a piece that came out yesterday in the Atlantic by Peter Keisler. Peter Keisler was the founder of the Federalist Society, the conservative legal organization that has produced so many Trump nominees and the like. He was the acting Attorney General of the United States for President Bush. And what Keisler says is, in impeachment proceedings, there is no First Amendment defense for good reason. He says, look, if you're facing a criminal prosecution or a civil trial for, burning the flag or wearing a swastika, the First Amendment's an absolute defense to that. That's freedom of speech. But if you're the president and you wear a swastika or burn the flag, you can't defend yourself on impeachment by saying it's free speech. That's crazy. And so he just makes that argument so beautifully. And again, you heard zero answer to it today from the Trump lawyers, because there is no answer.
I'm going to put that article in our newsletter, Wake Up Call, tomorrow. And anyone, if you guys don't want to look that piece up, you can just go to katiecouric.com and sign up for Wake Up Call, and it will be in your inbox in the morning, and you can read it along with some other interesting things that we put in there every day. Hey, Neal, before we go, and I'm sorry I didn't get to everyone's comments, and I never know, comments off, comments on. If you guys want to DM me and tell me your thoughts on that, please do. But what is the latest on the investigation about the readiness of the Capitol Police? It's so heartbreaking to me when I watched that video. They were so outnumbered, so mistreated. Obviously, people have died. The fire extinguisher on someone's head, the flag. I guess 2 individuals took their own lives. Do we know any more about why the Capitol Police just didn't seem prepared or didn't seem to take this seriously. I'm just still so befuddled by that.
I think it's such an important question, and I've tried to read the newspapers and other things on that, and so far not seen anything. I know that people are talking about the need for a commission, and I agree. There needs to be some sort of 9/11-ish commission here to get to the bottom of it, and it should be staffed by people who aren't trying to cast blame or anything. Just, don't politicize it. Just figure out what the heck happened, because, when you watch that video today, it's impossible to not have your heart go out to those cops. I mean, they were left with, as you were saying, virtually nothing. And yeah, it's flabbergasting. And so I really do hope that we get to the bottom of it, and people figure out what to do so that this will never happen again.
It was really sickening to witness that, and the language. And I was in Charlottesville for the so-called Unite the Right rally, and this was sort of like that on steroids. And it was really, I'm sure everybody who was there to witness it, it must have been incredibly terrifying. And, anyway. But anything else in closing, Neal, before we say goodbye? John, do you want to say hi to Neal?
Hi, Neal.
John, say hi. Just put your hand there and say hi to everyone else.
Hi, Neal.
Hey, I think you had a birthday, didn't you?
Hey, I mean, it's insane.
Yes, it is. But you know what I have to say is, like, watching it today, like, I realized how peaceful the last 2 weeks have been. Like, it's not been cray-cray every day and every night with Trump. And it's returned to some normalcy. And so it's been very pleasant.
Before I go, can I ask Neal one question?
Sure.
You probably covered it. Sorry, I wasn't listening. I wasn't paying attention. But is there anybody in the Senate on the Republican side that you really admire as this trial begins, who you're looking at as sort of a beacon of hope?
A profile in courage.
A profile in courage. Or do they just all want their free parking at national?
No. Well, you have 6 senators who.
Right. It's slim pickings, but I will say, Romney, even in the first impeachment, I mean, that statement about his vote was as elegant a statement about the Constitution, about the rule of law as I've seen. So I am watching him, and I'd like to hope that other Republicans watch him, because he's got to be the future of the party. I mean, maybe not himself, but his values, because the other side is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for losing everything.
I mean, I know that you hope that Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, whoever is standing up will be the future of the Republican Party. But it doesn't seem like it at this juncture that they are.
Well, I mean, one consequence of having a shrinking base, which they have, is that it gets more extreme, just almost by definition, because you have to appeal to that side of things. The problem for them is that is a losing side for national elections. And so they either have to right the ship or some new party will be created. I don't see any other alternative. They'll just become a loud fringe party, the way that some are in Europe. But it's not a way that they can win.
Votes beyond those 6.
He thinks there are.
You think there are?
Yeah, I'm hopeful. Who they are, I don't know. But, sometimes profiles in courage do emerge, in tough moments. And I think this is a tough moment. I think, if you're, when I was in the government, I'd always, like, during a hard decision, I literally would look at myself in the mirror and be like, who am I? What is this about? What's the right thing to do? And I'd like to think that they will do that. And it's pretty hard when you look at the evidence to come out the other way.
But on the other side, you have people's craven desire to cling to power and to not be primaried. And it seems to me that it is at all costs now. And, this isn't really a debate about policy issues or a debate about, feeling that less regulation is more, lower taxes are better. I mean, these are not ideological differences. These are really moral differences, I think. And, I'm not sure what the consequences will be for people speaking out. Certainly people like Jeff Flake found out. And even Cindy McCain and Ben Sass, who was also censured in Nebraska. The Republican Party has been co-opted by Trumpism, whether we like it or not. Now, whether or not that will change, I think, remains to be seen.
I agree with all that. I think this is a battle, and a battle for our soul as a nation. I 100% agree with that. I just think that the American public is not behind these crazy antics that, the Josh Hawleys of the world are. Maybe it gets them some votes, but I don't think that that's enough to be a long-term winning strategy. So this is a strategy that is doomed to fail. When it fails is the interesting question. I'd like to see that start next week. It may not, but I think it's going to die.
All right. On that note.
Bye, Neal.
If you guys like what you see, subscribe right here.